Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. When it comes to EVE news, there is of course the Alliance tournament that's starting this week, so if you want more EVE Online stuff to watch, you can definitely do that. It's on EVE.NT, they are streaming the entire Alliance tournament live there, so I'll try to catch some of it. I must say though that the weather here in Belgium is completely crazy. We've had a serious heat wave with up to 38 degrees Celsius just yesterday. So you can imagine that I haven't slept all too well last night and my energy levels are pretty low because of that. But we are here for the market, so let's jump into that. And we are going to start with plex and stuff. Talking about plex and stuff, of course, the Alliance tournament could have an impact on plex prices, and we can see here on the chart that we are actually dipping to a second bottom here in 2 months, and in my opinion the Alliance tournament could partly be responsible for that. When I forgot to put down a timestamp, I think that'll be at around 1 minute. And so plex going back down, actually another buy opportunity in my opinion. We do see a serious volume increase, so this might be a plex sale. I'm not exactly sure, I haven't seen that information pass here myself, but another possible explanation is of course the Alliance tournament as well, where some last minute buying would require some dumping of plex here. So maybe it's a combination of the two. Still, seeing the chart close to 2,750,000 disc is pretty good. The sellers in GTA itself are at 2,845,000 disc. If we go down to the player owned trade hubs though, less than 2.8 million for the sellers, and for the buyers around 2.7 million discs. So in my opinion, a really cheap plex, well below 1.5 billion for 30 days game time, and this is another nice opportunity on the chart to make that investment, the second one that we get in about 2 months time. As I always say, for me the horizon on an investment now for plex would be up until the winter. I think that possible winter expansion or some cool patches, but definitely just the general increased activity in the game usually does increase demand for plex, and this is a pattern that we have seen before. Not every single year, there are years where this is an exception, but this is obviously in my opinion the same pattern that we do see on most years in EVE Online, where we see a drop off of plex, you know, towards the summer. Usually May, June is usually where we bottom out. This time we actually also get a July bottom for plex. Very interesting in my opinion. If I didn't already have a pretty massive bank full of plex, I'd say that I would be buying. Maybe I should buy some extra, but we also do need some liquidity. Next up we have the multiple pilot training certificates. Those are stuck at 1 billion ISK. Increased volumes are there though for that decreased price. So here again, sales from CCP are the main culprit, I would say. Just above 1 billion for the sellers and 993 million for the buyers as well. So that gap is closing. The market is finding at the bottom here at around 1 billion ISK. It's not a nice opportunity of less than 900 million ISK that we had in April, but it is still a pretty sizable decrease in price compared to the high point that we had September, October here of up to 1.5 billion. That's 30% difference there. Could be a pretty good time to move in on that as well. Next up we have the skill extractor, which is of course very closely tied to plex, so that one is also going for a 1-year low at this point. I actually have a data point earlier that was at 310 million ISK, currently selling for 313 million ISK, and buyers are coming in at 305 million ISK, trying to pull the price back down. So here we can clearly see that while skill extractors are under pressure, they still have a little bit of momentum, because the margin between sellers and buyers still leaves some room for us to, for instance, try and grab sell prices for less than 310 million ISK if the pressure can continue here. Very cheap as well if you look at this entire chart, also in my opinion in a nice place to try an investment. Next up we have the injectors. Let's start with a large skill injector. Also now definitely a 1 year low point, well below 750 million ISK, which is pretty much where we started the year, but we're actually below that and still on a downwards momentum right here. So at the moment selling for 743 million ISK, the buyers are coming in at 727. Same story here, same difference with the multiple buyer trading certificate. You still have a little bit of room here. The buyers are still lowering their prices. Demand is not so high apparently at the moment for these large skill injectors, keeping a bit of a margin between sellers and buyers, potentially continuing the pressure here. Volumes are up quite a bit as well, so there must be some dumping happening at least. Next up we have the small skill injectors, also continuing to meander at a low point, lower than where we started the year off. Is this a full year already? Oh yeah, it is. And that is currently selling for 150 million ISK, 144 million for the buyers. In my opinion, all of these for the longer term are potentially investments that you could make. And finally we also have the daily alpha injector that is actually coming back to a normal price after presumably here a CCP sale that dropped the price to less than 50 million ISK. They are now selling for 59 million. The market is pretty small though. You can clearly see that the sellers, there's not that many of them, and the buyers at 55.5 million. There are some buyers. That is interesting. Not that many people sell for the daily alpha injectors. Volumes are pretty steady, but alpha clones do put up buy orders apparently to try and grab them. Very interesting in my opinion. Compared to the other skill injectors, this one is actually doing okay and might actually be the one to, you know, if you need that ISK right now, you might actually want to, you know, try to do it through a daily alpha injector at this point rather than plex or the other injectors or things like that, because you might just get the best bang for your buck there. You'd have to do all the calculations, but if you look at the charts, it looks like that's possible. Next up we have the minerals at 655. And you might already have seen from the ticker, there's definitely some interesting things happening here. Titanium breaking out to a 1 year high point above 6.5 ISK here on a median daily average, the latest one, which I think was yesterday. So if you look at JITA itself, 666, the mark of the beast, the number of the devil, that just happened to be the price where one big sell order of 1.7 billion units is stuck at. That is basically where I think whoever bought out must be a volume, well, it's not that much of a volume increase, actually finally a volume increase after a couple of days of decreased volumes, but that is where buyers stopped going straight for the sell orders. And so if we don't, because 9 and 10 jumps out, I don't think that's relevant. Yeah, we're at 6.6 ISK for the sellers, and buyers went up to 614 as well. This is the war, of course. We have keep stars destroyed, we have supers destroyed, we have lots of action. Let's hope that it can continue, but this is definitely an incredible sell opportunity for your titanium, the highest it's been in 1 year. I'm definitely going to try to sell some of the reserves that I've built up at this point, because this is quite volatile. This is up so sharply that if we have an end of the war later this summer, you're going to see this come back down very quickly as well. Quite a big surprise, but definitely an interesting one, and nice opportunity here. Finally, some real movements in minerals. This is titanium that went up. Do I see it on the ticker right now? Nope, not yet, but it went up quite a bit percentage-wise all of a sudden. Next up, let's take a look at pyrites that jumped up last week already, or was in the process of jumping up last week as well, trying to go to 4.5 ISK, but just not managing to do so. Sellers are at 4.5, buyers are at 421, but you can see the billion units here, 300 million units here. The dumping in the last 24 hours, half a front page here, is still happening. There's still more supply than needed for pyrite, so it can't break out the same way that titanium does, which went up 28.57%. That is quite huge for a 1 week move there. So let's see if Mexelon moves as well. No, it doesn't. Very, very interesting. Must mean that it could be investment related, or is that really a bottleneck in those really big structures and ships that are being that have to be replaced at this point? It is interesting to see Megasite still at 70 ISK at this point. Megasite selling for 69.78, buyers at 67.25. So a pretty narrow margin between these two. Basically, the market is saying, okay, that is the price for Megasite. I would have expected this to go up, but for now it looks like it's only titanium that has broken out. Isogen still flat at that 1-year low point, just way too much of it. 27.57 for the sellers and 26.69 for the buyers. I would personally still hold on to that at this point. And now we've got Noxium that does jump out. This might look like pretty nice, right, from 250 to probably like 310 or something like that, but keep in mind this entire chart is basically trying to defend 300 ISK for quite a while, and then we failed early June. We went as low as 250, and this is just a move back up to that average low point from before that breakthrough here. So Noxium selling at 311 ISK, buyers at 293. It is basically still really a very low price for Noxium. Still, if you made the investment at this point and you managed to buy at 250, you might be able to eke out a little bit of a profit on the current sell prices. Moving on to Zydrine, that one is staying very low, just above 500 ISK on the chart. 536, 537 for the sellers and 511 for the buyers. Obviously very cheap. And then here we have Megasite, same story, but around 600 ISK here. Sellers coming in at 608 and the buyers at 587. So still a bit of a margin as well between sellers and buyers here. Potentially we could still go either way. On enough war activities and reduced mining from nullsec, we might see enough decreased supplies to increase the price, but I do think that HiSec and remote space, but especially HiSec 0.5 systems, will take up any slack there. We'll try to just mine a little bit more to eke out that profit if they can. This is what the market is willing to pay for Megasite and Zydrine at this point, and it is no longer a nullsec exclusive, so they no longer control what happens with the price there. And then for the final minerals, we still have Morphite that also jumped up, quite interesting here. 8,630 was probably a buy opportunity, now selling for 10,400 ISK. Again, I think that this is related to the war. Lose some Tech 2 ships, need that to be replaced. You might actually need some extra Morphite here and there. And so we are back above 10,000 ISK for Morphite, 9,500 for the buyers. You could try to make profit on that trade if you made it. I'm not sure. I don't think I actually managed to grab the Morphite that I tried to buy for less when the chart was at less than 9,000 ISK. I think someone just immediately put up a buy order to compete with me and it never materialized. But if you did manage to grab some of that Morphite when the chart was well below 9,000 ISK, then at this point you can try to make some profit as well. So it's definitely Morphite and Titanium that are in an interesting sell position at this point. Perhaps Noxium if you risked that move, which to me felt very risky. I thought we were going to start to just move in the 250 to 300 band for the foreseeable future. The war might have changed that a little bit. Next up, we have PI at 13 minutes. Like that. As you all know, at this point, summertime, lower activities, what we're doing for PI is looking for investment opportunities. Broadcast notes last week, I think, was a pronounced opportunity. Average price below 2 million ISK, well below the entire chart. You can also see that some increased volumes came in to increase the price back to average. So some people did make those investments. 2.2 million for the sellers, almost 2.1 million for the buyers. It's back on average, so it's okay, I think, to buy that, hoping for a structural release to increase the price dramatically, but that nice buy opportunity which we called last week is unfortunately over already. The construction blocks, same story here, went as low as 11,000 ISK, even a little bit below that on a couple of days, is now coming back on the increased volumes. So the investors have made their moves. 12,200 for the sellers, 11,100 for the buyers, back at a slightly below average price at this point. Consumer electronics breaking out a little bit. You managed to sell them for buy them for 12,000 ISK about a month ago. Now at 15,000 ISK, definitely at a high point. 17,000 for the sellers, 15,000 for the buyers. If you make them or if you have them, this is a great opportunity to sell consumer electronics. Coolants for fuels is basically trying to stabilize above 10,000 ISK, which is a very respectable price for coolants. This dip here, due to the moon mining changes, has basically been digested at this point. 11,150 for the sellers, 9,700 for the buyers. Quite a bit of a margin, making the average price between 10 and 11,000. It does mean that both of these sides win out. So if you think that buying coolants for less than 10,000 ISK is potentially a good investment, you can try your hand at grabbing some of these buy orders, because it's definitely working for some people. And if you want to sell at 11,200 ISK, have the patience to put up the sell order. Next up, we have enriched uranium. Same story here. The massive dip with moon mining changes. Managed to stay above 11,000 ISK and is now trying to defend that price. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Integrity response drones, pretty much the same story as the broadcast nodes, except that we would like to see it a little bit lower. Buyers at 2 million would be such an obvious and immense opportunity for integrity response drones. It's just not materializing. We are staying at the average price of just above 2.5 million. 2.7 million in fact for the sellers, 2.58 million for the buyers. I would say that we are slightly above average, but still in the well affordable range, of course. The mechanical parts should be a similar story to coolants, actually managing to get above 11,000 ISK at this point on average. 12,000 for the sellers and 11,000 for the buyers. Very nice comeback for the fuels. If you did buy on these low points, you are of course now in a good spot to try and sell for some profits. Nuclear reactors finally slowly going up. I did make an investment on this dip, I think for around 80,000 ISK, maybe a touch above that. But look at the slow increase, almost 100,000 ISK for the sellers, 87,000 ISK at this point for the buyers. It's a gap opening up between sellers and buyers, with the sellers just constantly going higher and higher, and the buyers just constantly hesitating about what they should do here. But it's nice to see that chart head back for 100,000 ISK. Perhaps if we break that, we could see some volatility in the nuclear reactors and we could create a sell opportunity. Next up, we have the organic mortar applicators. Not that much to say, around average price of 1.1 million ISK, and that gap is basically non-existent. 116, 111, those are the sellers and the buyers. So this is the price that you're paying for organic mortar applicators. Would be nice to see a million or less than that on the buyers, but there is apparently still a strong enough demand. Obviously, losing a couple of keep stars, if you need to replace that or make more of them, that's quite a bit of PI to grab as well. Robotics in the meantime are working at towards a high point of 110,000 ISK. We haven't seen that in quite a while. 110,000 for the sellers, 100,000 for the buyers. It's the fuels making that comeback and coming back in normal trade ranges. Very good to see. Again, if you manage to grab for 90,000 ISK, I'd say that now is a pretty good time to try and sell for a profit. Self-harmonizing power cores actually heading up a little bit towards 2.25 million. Sellers are at 2.3, buyers are at less than 2.1 million. That is maybe interesting, less than 2.1 million. Definitely at the lower end of the chart, a bit of a margin between sellers and buyers opening up here. So on a bit of more dumping and a couple of these buyers getting filled, you might be able to have a nice buy opportunity of close to 2 million. For self-harmonizing power cores. If you want to make the investment here, I don't think it's a bad idea if you try to grab them for less than 2.1 million on the buyer side. The superconductors, actually breaking out, quite interesting. Was basically very stable in the 12,000 ISK range for quite a while. I actually make these guys myself, and now selling for almost 14,000 ISK, 13,700 for the sellers, 12,800 for the buyers. So all of a sudden, a bit of a demand jump in superconductors, selling above average now. And then the test cultures are continuing the seesaw movement down, heading back for 7,500 ISK on average, 7,900. Well, not yet, I would say then. Yeah, not yet. The chart is just on a weird number jump here. So it's actually 8,200 for the sellers and 7,900 for the buyers. You can see that 7,500 does get played with from time to time. That's the price, I would say, for the buyers. If you ever see them below that, that's where you can make a definite investment in test cultures. And then finally we have the wetware mainframes that also, you know, 3 times now dipped below 2.25 million on the chart. Nice buy opportunities, average price of close to 2 million, but there is of course always a little bit of a comeback when an opportunity like that is created, back to 2.3 million on average at this point. Moving on to the advanced moon materials at 1930. This one will be a little bit different because I got a request to change the order in which I cover them. So starting with the carbonites or carbides, then we move on to the metamaterials and then the rest of the stuff. And the reason is that these are normally tied to Empire related space or something like that. So, you know, let's do this and let's see if it works this way. Another possibility is that I make basically 3 categories out of the advanced moon materials. Call it 4.1, 4.2 and 4.3. We'll see if this is workable. Let's start with number 1, the crystalline carbonites, which are related to the Galente. You can see on the chart that we are actually heading for a 1-year low point here for around 150 ISK on average on the chart. 157 for the sellers, 154 for the buyers. Super narrow margin as well at this low point. This is potentially an investment opportunity in my opinion. Next up we have the Fernite Carbide Minmatar related. It's definitely pretty low as well, but not at a 1-year low point just yet. Stable at around 175, 174.5 for the sellers and 167 for the buyers. A bit more of a margin between sellers and buyers here, so potentially on more pressure, still some room down. For this one, and then the spikes, you can clearly see that 300, 350 is sometimes doable as well. 250 is definitely a possibility for the market. So if we do the same for crystalline carbonite, you can also see 200, 250 are things that are doable. So we are going to move on now to the titanium carbide, which should be Caldari related. Same story here, definitely below average. Not a 1-year low point, that was a couple of weeks ago at around 173. Currently selling for 188. Buyers are at 188 as well. Look at that margin just completely disappearing here. This does indicate that the sellers dictate prices of these goods, and we are still well below average though. So important to note, I think potentially titanium carbide and crystalline carbonite could be in the right spot for some investments still. Tungsten carbide from MAR related sources are down from a high point, so completely different from the other ones. Starting at 275, well above the others, well above average, is currently down to 237 for the sellers and 228 for the buyers, and here is basically heading back towards an average price at this point. Very interesting. 3 of them are low. The MR one is still high. You can still, if there's anything that you want to sell, it's probably tungsten carbide. The others, interesting for potentially an investment. Then we are moving on to the metamaterials. We'll keep the same order. So here are the photonic metamaterials for Galente, actually taking off in price a little bit, going back above 20,000 ISK, which I would put as the average of the entire chart here. So quite interesting. Currently selling for 21,200. Buyers are at 19,800. So a slightly above average sell price. Buyers around average for photonic metamaterials. Then we have the plasmonic metamaterials also going up in price from 20,000 to 25,000 ISK. So this is definitely moving up and above average. 25,000 for the sellers, 22,000 almost for the buyers, both of which are above average. Next up we have, let's see, non-linear metamaterials, which goes from 25,000 ISK up to above 30,000 ISK. So same story, from around average to above average at this point. 32,200 for the sellers, 31,700 for the buyers. And then finally we also have the terahertz metamaterials that are actually hovering and going down in the last week, back towards, still above average, but back towards a more average price, 23k, something like that. 25,000 for the sellers, 23,600 for the buyers. Very interesting, different perspective for these advanced moon materials. Looking at these two sections here, we've got carbonites 3 out of 4 at low points, 1 at a high point, and then we actually have increased prices for the metamaterials at the moment. Moving on to the rest of the stuff, here is the fermionic condensates, basically above average, a little bit of pressure at the tail end, but nothing too dramatic. Then we have the ferrogel definitely stuck at 55,000 ISK, which is a 1-year high point or very close to that, and very expensive at the moment. Next up, we've got the Fuller rights. A couple of weeks ago, also at a high point of 1500 ISK, now on its way back down. Buyers, in fact, at 1000 ISK and sellers at 1100 ISK. That is definitely quite a bit of room given back. 1000 ISK, I would say, is around the average. If you manage to break through that, we could get into an interesting market to look into for active trading. Hypersynaptic fiber still well above average as well, currently holding on at around 16,000 ISK. We've got the nano transmitters, same story, jump up to 6,000 ISK at the moment, above average. The phenolic composites also coming from a high point of almost 3,500 ISK, giving back a little bit of ground, but still selling for 3,000 ISK, well above average for the entire year. And then finally, we also have the ceramic fibers that are also at a high point. So very, very good suggestion. This definitely changes the way we can look at these advanced moon materials. Gives us a little bit more of an insight that there are actually different categories here. We get the carbonites, we get the metamaterials, and then we get the rest of the stuff that is clearly mostly at 1-year high points or very close to that. Well above average, I would say, for all of the other stuff. So the carbonites actually look interesting if you want to make that, or carbides look very interesting if you're looking to make some investments at this point. Next up, let's take a look at the Tech2 ships at 2540. That way of covering advanced moon materials also, you know, makes it maybe a bit more smooth. So yeah, very, very good suggestion. Thank you very much for that. Let's move on to some Tech2 ships. Here is the Ares landing at 30 million ISK. So here again, sellers at 30 million, buyers at 28 million. Not a pronounced buy opportunity, basically back towards an average price. I don't really want to risk making a move on that. Definitely not as good as some of those carbonites on the chart. Next up here we got the Cerberus actually staying quite high, up to 330 million. I think that Cerberus fleets are still used actively in nullsec as well. 312,000 for the sellers, 277 for the buyers. It is a great ship in PvE as well, and it is definitely at a high point at this point, well above average. So nope for the investments. If you can make them or sell them, you might want to do that. The Claw is staying above 30 million by quite a bit, selling in fact for 35 million almost, buyers at 32 million, so that's a big no for me again. Next up we have the Crow, that did go down to less than 30 million ISK and is now jumping back up to 32.5 on the chart, 33 for the sellers, 31 for the buyers. Was this a buy opportunity? No, I think the percentage is still too low. We would need to see this break out to an even lower point before I decide to jump in. Next up we have the Crusader. Dipped to 70 million ISK, is now on its way back up to 90 million ISK. You know, that does seem a lot more interesting until you see the volumes on the market. Then you realize that you're very unlikely to actually make that trade because there's not enough being traded there. The Hound next, there we go, went up to 45 million ISK, is on its way down, and I would call these buy opportunities when we have the chart well below 30 million ISK. Buyers are at 29.6, give that a bit more time, give that a bit more pressure from all of these sales, like 420 here, not 21 here, at 33 million. There is an opportunity, I think, to trade in these stealth bombers at the moment. The Hound here showing the volatility of the nullsec war and the buy opportunities that are viewable on the chart when it gets to less than 30 million ISK. Next up we've got the Ishtar, actually a little bit of a bump that it's coming down from, up to 300 million again, 285 for the sellers, which is doable for an Ishtar. Manticore still staying well above 35 million ISK. Just, you know, it's always a bit of a premium, the Manticore, compared to the other stealth bombers, but I don't like its chart as much as I like the Hound chart, so that's a no for me again. Next up here we've got the Nemesis, that did dip below 30 million ISK, is currently back above that, 31.5 million for the sellers, 28.5 for the buyers. I think last week was a nice time to try and grab a couple of cheap Nemesis. I'm not sure where the buyers were at anymore, but it's definitely lower than what they are now. What we do need though is that hound volatility, a jump up to 35-40 million would make this trade worthy. So if you still have these a Nemesis or something like that that you bought for, let's say, 26-27 million ISK, I would still hold on to it. I would not pull the trigger on this meager increase in price. You can see the potential here above 30 million ISK. It does exist at the right time, of course. Next up, we've got the Pontifex, very flat at the current high point. High point at the current trade range, which is quite a premium from before moon mining changes. And the volumes here again make it very difficult to call trades on that. I would really need to see the bottom drop out of this chart before I make a move on it. The Purifier is staying at around that 35 million ISK mark again as well. 35 for the sellers, 31 for the buyers. So I would love to see the chart play with 30 million so that we can get a buy opportunity in there. The Raptor actually up as well a little bit and never breaking the 30 million mark, so very difficult to make trades on that one. The Saber is actually dropping to less than 80 million ISK. Saber has decent volumes, 76 million for the sellers, 70 million for the buyers. That is definitely at the lower end here. I would say if the Saber has respectable volumes and the Saber has some volatility, if those buyers would drop off to quite a bit below 70 million ISK, that's maybe the first interdictor or larger than a frigate trade that I would dare to risk. But we would need to see this chart get down to that 70 million ISK mark and then the buyers well below that. Then we've got the Stiletto, managed to stay well above 30 million ISK for quite a while, but this is a weird data point right here at less than 28 million. No, it's, I don't know, maybe a sell in a different station or something like that, because it's 32 million for the sellers, 30 million for the buyers. It's not as good as what I've seen before, so no buy opportunity there. That's unfortunate, right? The Stork back up as well from 75 million ISK to 87 million ISK, but then here again, look at the volumes. They are too low to really make any trades on that. And then finally the Taranis that dipped below 30 million ISK, just like the Nemesis here. So I think if you manage to grab buy orders at this point of the chart, hold on to them for now, but the Taranis did just go up to 32 million ISK on the seller side once again. So the Tech 2 market is still in a very difficult position in my opinion. There is impact from the wars that happen in Nulsec, absolutely. The Hound one here is the nice example of what you can still find in the Tech 2 market for trade potentials. This is pretty good, right? You could have probably bought these for 28 million and then here you could have sold them for 40 million. Very nice little trade. Took maybe 2 weeks or so to materialize. That's pretty awesome, but it is still so rare at this point that it is very difficult to actually find them. And I'm not going to take big gambles on this, and I need to see that pronounced buy opportunity, that chart play with, for instance, for the frigates less than 30 million ISK, preferably even 25 million on the chart or for the buyers or something like that before I decide to pull the trigger. Very, very difficult market in my opinion to trade in at this point. What might be a bit better is the Tech 3 market. Let's move on to that at 32.15. While I think you can make more trades in the Tech 3 market, you also do need more time. You can see the fast increases in prices all of a sudden that happen in the Tech 2 market. Things will be a lot slower in the Tech 3 market. Here is, for instance, the Confessor. We did see a 1-year low of 30 million not that long ago, but it's always a bit more of a slower periods where we have some more sustained increases or decreases that create these opportunities. Selling at 60 million, then it took several months, and here we go down to 34 million ISK, eventually actually breaking to 30 million ISK on the seller side, and now we're actually slowly on the upswing. 35 million for the sellers, 31.5 million for the buyers. The one thing to note though, 146, 148 right here, 92. These are still a lot of Confessors that are on the market. The oversupply specter, which is also what pushed us to that 30 million low point, it does still exist at this point. Finding the right buy opportunities, I think, is the name of the game in the Tech 3 destroyer market at this point. The sell opportunities, they could take a while. It might take us a couple of months or even more for an actual increase in price to really materialize. I think you need more patience here than in the Tech 2 market. The Hecate is actually still under pressure here at the tail end, currently selling for 36 million ISK, 33 million for the buyer. So it's selling for more than the Confessor, and look at the response. 360, another 60 here, another 73 here. This is very dangerous. That is what I was constantly talking about. Oversupply is potentially really possible in the Tech 3 market, and so make the investments at the right time, and never, I would say, go all out when it comes to buying at this point. Always, I think, make sure that you still have some reserves to buy in case that oversupply pushes the prices even lower. Next up here, we get the Jackdaw, actually up probably on some nullstick action, went from probably 36 million or something, even 34 million ISK, up to 50 million. So a nice little trade that could have been made here, currently selling for 45 million ISK. I have to think, I think I have a couple of Jackdaws that I bought. Usually I buy in trees or something like that. An investment of around 100 million ISK is what I always try to do when I feel like I need to make a couple. But look at the response. We went up to 45 million ISK and there's 384 of them, 257, 174, 54, 61. That is hundreds and hundreds of Jackdaws that the market will need some time to absorb. All competition is going to drive the price quite down very quickly. But this is the Tech 3 market. We start over here early June, 35 million, a little bit less than that as a buy opportunity, but it takes a whole month here for the price to go up to 50 million ISK on a unique situation, the nullstick war. This is definitely a buy and sell opportunity, but that danger here of that oversupply, it still definitely exists. Next up, we've got the Zwepel, also going up in price on pretty big volumes, went as low as 33 million, pretty much, currently selling for 38 million and then 33.6 million. The difference, I would say, between this and all the others is obviously the volumes. So I would see this move as investors moving on these low points of 33 million. Buyers maybe would have dropped off to close to 30 million ISK. Makes a lot of sense to try and grab some of the cheapest Zwepels at this point, driving the price up to 38 million ISK. And you know, this looks better. 31, 43, 40, that's all absorbable. But now we also know that that potential, the hundreds of ships, are existing in the Jackdaw, in the Hecate, and in the Confessor. So what are you going to produce at this point? You might still gamble on some Jackdaws, but they will go down in price, of course. And then for the Zwepel, well, that is where you will move your production. So expect hundreds of ships to come back on this market, in my opinion. Difficult to trade in, you need a different horizon, but definitely possible as well. Next up, we have the cruisers. Here is the Legion landing at around 150 million ISK, 160 for the sellers, 147 for the buyers. We still see this as well here, 180. It's not as pronounced as with the destroyers, but in my opinion, potentially oversupply can exist here as well. The Loki is defending 250 million ISK, sellers are at 245, and this is what I was talking about. Look at that, 245 million, 390, 468, 288, 180, 192. That is a lot of Lokis. That is definitely putting a stop to potential increased prices, and shows again that potential of production is way higher than what we can absorb at the moment. So potentially lower prices are definitely in the cards. The Proteus is actually dipping below 150 million, is currently selling for 143. Again at 150 you can see the listing of many ships here. Buyers are at 132. That is quite a wide gap, and 132 on the charts is at the lower end. Don't blame you. I would personally love to see it even lower than that, maybe even towards the 120. That's where I would say, yeah, definitely grab a couple of Protei. But the cruiser market has also been a bit more manipulated, in my opinion. We can see that from these very steady prices and then these massive jumps up. I think that it was small enough to be relisted. Now that we are seeing 600, 500, another 141, it becomes trickier and trickier to do. So competition has time to come in, driving the price down to less than 155 million ISK. Where are the buyers at 145 for the Tengu? Nothing too pronounced, but this week I would say, if you still want to make an investment, You can still look into the Confessor, although you're a little bit late. The Hecate potentially as well, I think, could be good for these cruisers. But all of them, except for the Zwepel, which I think by next week we'll see massive volumes there, do show that there are still hundreds of ships out there just waiting for the right time for an increase in price to come to the market. Oversupply is a reality here. Potentially it can still drive the prices back down. We're still only midway summer, and we have seen that even in September the oversupply can really take hold in the Tech 3 market. It's a difficult one, rife with opportunity, but also with risk, in my opinion. Next up we have the extra material that is going to be at 39 minutes. Like that, and it's a request actually on another video that I thought was pretty good. We're gonna look at some mining ships at this point. So let's start with the mining barges. Exhumers is Tech 2, yeah, so we'll start with the mining barges, which are at a 1-year low point of 20 million ISK for the Coveter. The Procurer is also at a 1-year low point of 15 million ISK, even less than that on average, 14.5 million for the first seller. And then here we have the Retriever, a little bit of a bump up, but also a 1-year low point at 17.5 million, 18 million for the sellers at this point. This is the mineral market, of course, showing up in the Tech 1 market. There's not much to say. We've been so low in mineral prices that all of these Tech 1 mining barges are actually at a 1-year low point. Next up we've got the Exhumers though, so those are the Tech 2 ones. Here is the Hulk, 350 million ISK. If you look at this entire chart, a little bit above average, but not by too much. An okay price, 353 for the sellers, 322 for the buyers. Yeah, bit above average, nothing too crazy, actually coming down a little bit in the last couple of weeks. The Mackinac next, very stable, and I would put this at the average price, around 280 million ISK, yep, 278 for the sellers, 242 for the buyers. A big step up from any Tech 1 ship, of course, but this is an average price for the year, actually, maybe even at slightly at the lower end there, nothing too dramatic there. Also, quite notable, the lack of volatility here. The Hulk has some volatility, so potentially here 300 million to 400 million, pretty nice for trades. On the Mackinac, which I would say is probably the most popular one, no, that's not where you're gonna make trades in. And then finally we have the Skiff that actually went, I would say, a little bit below average and is now back towards 250 million, around average for that one as well. 249 million for the sellers, 230 million for the buyers. And then I'm going to also, of course, look at the Orca. Let's take a look at that. Ooh, the Orca, Tech 1 related, you know, really cheap. Actually diving below 700 million is really cheap, is always subjective, of course. But 720 million for the first seller and 664 million for the buyers. I do think you can grab an Orca for less than 700 million ISK. The chart actually shows that yes, you can. Have some patience, put up, maybe if you absolutely want one right now, you can put up an aggressive buy order, 690, something like that, and I do think someone will sell the Orca to you. That is the pressure from the minerals showing up in that big ship as well. And then I'm not sure, I don't think we'll have any meaningful data for the Rorqual, but we can take a look. We do have something. It's not like you can sell them here. We do have a chart that actually indicates slightly lower prices for the Rorqual. So I'm also quickly, it's Nullsec. I don't really know this ship too well, but let's take a quick look at industry. So that's actually also minerals. Mostly, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And that for industry, yep, that's also minerals. So the Rorqual is actually also below average on the price. It's still 2 billion ISK for the ship. But you can also see here that the mineral price drove it down from 2.2 to less than 2 billion. Sometimes close to 1 year low points as well. So the mining ships at the moment are, well, generally cheap. The Orca, Rorqual, Tech 1s are super cheap at the moment. The Tech 2 ships are a bit above average, nothing too crazy there. So it's quite affordable if you need to replace your mining ships at the moment. And there you go, guys. That's going to be it for this EVE talk. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.